Welcome to Check In with Jason Lauritsen, where we explore how to create human, connected workplaces that employees love and fuel organizational success. Each week, I invite someone who's leading the way in this work to join me for a conversation that will both educate and inspire us. And my guest today is Tess Brigham. Tess is a licensed therapist, certified coach, and TEDx speaker who spent more than 20 years helping people figure out who they are, what they want, and how to build a life that feels right to them. I think we all need that, Tess. Dubbed the Millennial Therapist by CNBC, Tess now works with organizations to help them better understand and support their youngest employees. Tess is also the host of a great podcast called The Gen Mess with Tess, which I'm sure you're going to go find as soon as you listen to this one. Tess, thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into what we're here to talk about today, I want to get to know you a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And so I'd love to start with, I guess, just having you tell me a little bit more about the range of interesting work you do, because you do a lot of interesting stuff. And so tell us a little bit more about the things you do.
Yes. So as you mentioned, I've been working with people for over 20 years, and I did not intend to work with young people. I always say they found me, but I had 12, 13 years ago, I had opened up a therapy practice, and I was just getting into coaching at that time because coaching had really shifted and changed, right? People stopped asking you what sport, you tell them you're a coach. So I had just been coaching, and then I started this practice in San Francisco, not really knowing who was going to show up. And then all of a sudden it was 25, 26, 27-year-olds showing up. And I'm like, oh, wait a second. You're these millennials that I've heard so much about that everyone hates. And I was like, wait a minute, you're not lazy, you're not entitled, you're nothing like anybody's describing you to be or how the media has described you. And I got really fascinated by, oh, wait a second, I remember being in my 20s. I remember how hard this was. I went through a quarter-life crisis. I went through all of this stuff as well. And what occurred to me too when I was working with these young people was just how incredibly difficult it was. It's just the world's very different now, and it's a lot harder. I mean, I think, it is a lot harder. I think social media and technology has helped us in some ways, but it has created a lot of problems. And because technology is moving so quickly, the problems are happening so fast that we don't even know how to catch up with them. So that's it. And it felt like, okay, these young people, they need someone to help them, someone to advocate for them. And that's how I started. I just got very interested in the generations and in millennials. And then my millennial clients, they're now older. They're in their 40s. There's millennials in their 40s that they're married with kids and different lives. And then all of a sudden this new generation showed up. And I'm like, oh, wait a second. You guys are very different. You're different than I'm a Gen Xer, how I was raised. You're different than millennials. You're your own thing. And again, I went through the process again of trying to understand, okay, how, what makes this generation tick? And so, yeah, that's it. I've been working with young people for a while now, and that's really, I do a lot of different things, but I always say it's all in service of young people. So, I have a therapy practice and a coaching practice where I work with primarily young people, or I'll work with their parents who are trying to help their kid launch. And then the other part of my business is speaking about the generations in the workforce, and then going into companies and helping them really figure out how to retain and engage their youngest employees. Because, right, this is where we're, I love how we criticize the youth every single time, but it's like, okay, but this is who we're working with here. Like, this is right. They're a representation of what's happening in the world today. And that's what I really try to do, is help people sort of reframe how they think about young people and their motivations and their drives and, what drives them to do what they do.
Well, and hopefully it's exactly what I hope we're going to do today.
Yes.
A little bit. I do want to double click on something here, because when I first talked to you, I left kind of curious about this. You talk about quarter life crisis, which I don't know that I think you might be the first person that I heard use that phrase. Mm-hmm. So can you talk, I can intuit that it means, what it means, but I'm curious, like what it looks like in actual practice. When you describe what that is, I'm just curious how do you describe what that experience is?
Yeah. So I know the concept has been around for a while, because I remember being back in the 90s, watching Oprah talk about this. But it was back then, it was really dismissed. People are like, oh, please, like you're 25, 26 and you're having a crisis. But I really describe it as you don't have to be exactly 25. You could have a quarter life crisis, at 22, you can have it at 30. Really, the idea of it is that it's an existential crisis where I think the common thing that I see, which is what I went through, which is you grow up, you have this vision of who you think you are, what you believe your life is going to look like, what you believe excites you and motivates you. You jump into life, you start working towards those things. For me, it was a career, and then you get there and you realize, wait a second, this isn't who I am. Like this person that I've been trying to become or be isn't at all what I want. And it's this sort of existential crisis of the reality of, oh, what I thought my life was going to look like, how I thought things were going to be are not the reality of it. And there's that part of it. And then there's the other part of, okay, so then who am I? And that's why it feels very existential to people, because it is this question of like, well, who am I then? So my first career, I worked in LA, Hollywood, and I singularly focused on that. That was my dream. I was working towards it. And so even though I was only 27 and it seemed kind of silly, like this 27-year-old's having a meltdown, but for me, it was this identity that I had had for more than half my life. And everything I had done was in service to this dream, this idea. And then waking up and realizing, oh, wait a second, I don't fit in here. This is not me. I don't want any of this. You're stuck in this strange place of, okay, so who am I? And that happens a lot when you're young. What I try to get people to see is that remember how we all were when we were dreaming about our lives in our childhood bedrooms? Like the fantasy can be whatever we want it to be. So there is always this natural letdown that people feel as they enter into life, into what really work looks like, into what marriage is, into what parenting is and homeownership, like all of these things that when you're young, you see these as these boxes to be checked, this idea of it. But it's not until you really get in there that you're like, oh, wait a second, this is what it is. And so I see this a lot with people where they've been in a career for 5-6 years, where they're not so far they're into it, but they're far enough into it to realize, oh, wait a second, I don't like this. Or this isn't at all what I thought it was going to be.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and it feels, this is a topic for, I think, a whole nother podcast conversation potentially, but it feels to me like, as I'm hearing this, I'm like, well, that sounds exactly like a midlife crisis. It's just that these particular people are probably, their career ambition and their level of self-awareness or sort of self-discovery is at a higher level. So they get there earlier. Whereas I think a lot of people get distracted by life and they get sucked down whatever rabbit holes of their career and family and things. And then they wake up one day in their 40s and go, how did I get here? I don't even recognize this. And so interesting.
Yes.
And I think I have seen people go through that. I think I'd rather do it in my 20s than my 40s, to be honest. So
well, and that's why I'm always trying to get people to recognize, like, this is the time. In your 20s is the time to do this. If you are unsure about what you want to do, if you are questioning it, do it now. Don't, because I've seen that. I'm sure you've seen it too, where people are like, oh, well, it'll get better, or what, or that feels too scary to leap. And so they don't. And then, but really they're just kicking the can down the road.
I think what happens, at least I've seen this, is they keep seeking out that answer or fulfillment or identity in something else, in a relationship or in a hobby or in a new place or in a new city, or they just keep chasing it, realizing like, no, this isn't a chasing thing. This is a thing you have to stop and be with. So it's interesting stuff. So thank you for that. I just wanted to, I've been thinking about that and curious about that since we chatted. All right. So what I wanted to get into today is you had a new TEDx talk that was recently published. It's called What Your Gen Z Kids Want You to Know, which I think is a great title and a great bit of content. I loved it. As a parent of Gen Z kids, I found it particularly relevant to me and where I'm at. And so I guess maybe I'd like to start with, if we can kind of, maybe you give us a snapshot. I mean, obviously people can go and they should go watch the whole thing, but what does Gen Z want their parents to know?
Well, yeah, and it's really for the parents and for people who are business owners and bosses and all of that, which is that Gen Z, they maybe can't necessarily articulate this, but what we need to understand about them is that whatever we went through, so their parents are primarily Gen Xers, right? So whatever we went through is not applicable at all to what they're going through. That we've got to stop saying, well, this is what I did and this is how I handled it. So that the world is very, very different, that young people are starting their careers in a deficit. And I think that's the part that is really, really important for people to recognize is that even though maybe Gen Z is being they've been watching all these other generations. They've been watching millennials get these, very expensive educations that didn't translate into more salary or more money, right? So they've been watching. But for them, they've also kind of bought into this idea. This was what millennials were sold on for a long time, which is you go to you work hard in high school, you get into a good college. If you get into a good college and do well there, then you'll get a good job, and then therefore you'll be happy. And that was, I felt like, the mentality that I was taught as well. But the reality was, you could actually make that happen. The cost of living was much lower. The cost of education was a lot lower. You could actually, graduate from college, get a job, be able to live on your own, maybe save some money, do some things. But then that started to change with millennials because they were $200,000 in debt before they even started school. And then that affected how much they could buy houses. And then housing prices went up. I mean, I'm out here in California where it's utterly ridiculous, but it's ridiculous no matter where you go. I mean, if you look at any major city, it's the cost of living and what we are expecting young people to live on and what is the reality is very different. And so that mentality is really, you've got to understand that young people are starting their careers already in this headspace of, I'm never going to, there's no pension. There may be not even any health benefits. Why am I, and this boss is going to tell me that I need to work an extra 2 to 3 hours for no money. Am I really going to do that? Because there used to be a payoff. There really was. There was a payoff that when someone in, the 50s started their career, you could buy a home. You could do all these things. You knew you could have retirement. All you had to do was put in the time and energy and do that. And it was this mentality of, if you work hard, you will get the fruits of your labor. And what's been happening over the last several years is like, no, not really. You can work very, very hard and nothing could really, none of it can be easy. And I just see in my own life today, I mean, I think my parents at my age, had a lot more disposable income than I do. A lot more, even though my husband and I both, make good money, we're like, why are we broke? Why are we? But that is, and I am not unusual. That's the mentality of a lot of people, and so young people, they're entering the workforce with no guarantees of anything. So they're walking in with this idea of, okay, so if I'm not going to get paid, if I'm not going to be rewarded, if I've seen everybody so stressed out all the time from work, and their mental health is in the garbage, in the gutter, and they are stressed out all the time, they're really walking into their careers going, well, how do I not do that? How do I walk into or start my career with this idea of, I need to be right? I'm going to think about my mental health. I'm going to enjoy my life now. I'm not going to, if there is no golden goose at the end of this, if there's no money at the end of this rainbow, well, I'm just going to enjoy my life now. And that's really what they're doing. So they're really walking into careers in the world of like, okay, I'm going to enjoy my life. And that's the part that's to understand, that people have to really understand, is it's young people are not pushing back. They're not digging into these things because they are trying to be difficult or to be cruel or lazy or entitled or any of those other things. They're doing it as self-preservation. And this is one thing I've been talking about for a long time, which is, I saw this pre-pandemic, which is how burned out we are. This technology is really burning us out. And again, we have no idea what the long-term effects are of social media, of any of this technology. We have no idea. So I think it's just been recently that we've really started to see like, oh, wait a second, it does create more stress. Oh, wait a second, it does affect your mental health. Oh, okay. So we've got this younger generation walking in saying, okay, well, the world that I live in today isn't going to take care of me, and I need to take care of myself. And what's the best way to take care of myself? Through my mental health.
So you did in the video, I thought it was really interesting. You told a story about a particular person, but you really, I think, unpacked interestingly the dynamic. Like I currently have a 28-year-old son that lives in our basement with us because of he's transition. He's in the process, in the journey. He's on a good path. But, so at the 20s are a time to sort things out. And I thought your advice or sort of the guidance there was really interesting. And I'd love for you to share a little bit of that before I'm going to ask you that. Then we're going to transition to the workplace directly. But I think for those that are parents, if you have, and actually as you answer this, tell us what specifically Gen Z is so that everybody, if you're not, because there's so many different anymore. I used to, but when there was like, when it was boomers and Gen X and Gen Y, I could keep track of that. But now it's sort of like there's lots of layers, it seems. But what is it that parents are doing wrong or getting wrong? And what is it that these young adults really want or need from their parents right now?
Yeah. Well, so Gen Z it's you'll see different things from different people in different publications, but it's people that are born around 1997 to, I want to say, 2012. That's sort of what we're talking about, that generation. Okay. So there are what they call Zennials that are millennial, right? That were kind of on that cusp. And then there's, these other people that were born in 2011, 2012, who had a very different, they're going to be on the cusp of these two generations as well. But this Gen Z they were very much affected by the pandemic. And that was the story that I told, was of a client's college experience during the pandemic. And this is something that parents, they don't quite really get what the impact is of leaving, for a year plus college. And, because college is a short amount of time, and these are packed years, and you want to try to accomplish a lot, and how much just 6 months, a year, how that can change it for people. But the main thing is I number one, try to tell parents, like, this isn't about blaming yourself, isn't about pointing the finger or saying that you did this wrong or that wrong, that there's a lot of, I think, as a parent of a Gen Z or myself, there's a lot of blame for the parents of and that's what I say. It's like, you didn't cause a pandemic. You didn't know these phones were going to make us, no one knew. And so, but the thing is, okay, we need to normalize and validate it. And then, okay, so now what are we going to do? How are we going to approach this as a group? And a lot of it is back to what I was saying earlier, which is stop comparing your life to theirs. Stop going in there and telling them what you think they should be doing, because quite frankly, you don't know what they should be doing. And so really it's about asking questions. And this has always been what I've always been telling parents from beginning of, when I first started working parents, they would always ask me, what do I do about my kid who's calling me all the time? And I'm like, stop fixing all their problems. Stop answering their questions. Start asking questions. Put it back on them to start to sort through and figure this stuff out. Because that's the skill. That's what I'm doing in my individual therapy and coaching sessions with my clients. That's what I'm doing with them, is I'm asking them, I'm pushing them a little bit to ask themselves, well, what do I like? What don't I like? What's going to make me happy? What's not going to make me happy? And then encouraging them to go, okay, so try that out. See how that goes. See what happens. And so it seems, I think at first I was like, is this a really original concept, asking questions? But it's for parents. I know that there's this pressure to feel like you have to have the answers. And that's the other part of it too, is just telling parents, no, you don't have to have the answers. You really don't. But but you do have to be mindful and understanding of what your kid is going through and what it's like for them. And that, the way to motivate them and excite them is to just kind of what therapists and coaches do, point them and, ask them questions and then let them go and see it for themselves.
One of the things too that I thought about as I was listening to the TEDx too, was that I don't think we recognize too as parents, you highlighted one thing, which is that if you don't ask questions and listen, they stop talking to you often over time, right? If all you're doing is saying, well, when I was your age, here's what I did, or you're giving the tough love or whatever, they will shut down. And that's what most parents want to avoid at all costs. The other downside to the advice piece is that if you do have a child, I would guess that let's say does listen to you and you are giving them the advice or you're trying to fix things, when it doesn't work, guess what that also creates? That creates frustration and resentment and all the things that is also not healthy for your relationship. So I think the simplicity of we have to be reminded to do the most important things. And so I'm glad you're reminding us again, just ask questions, be curious, be supportive, but ask questions. That was just such a great reminder, I thought.
Yeah. Well, and I think parents also, right, your kid wants to hear, your kid does value what you have to say. They do want to hear that. And you also have to recognize that they don't, their friends are all going through the same craziness that they're going through. So I think that the role of the parent is very important. It's not about saying, oh, you don't have anything to say. It's just about figuring out, how are you going to say it? And how are you going to deliver it? And instead of sitting them down and saying, well, this is what I did and this is how I did it, you can be a little bit more creative and ask pointed questions of, well, what would happen if you did that? Well, what do you think this would look like? What do you think? Let them, you're maybe still guiding them towards something that you think would be better for them in a sense, but you're allowing them to make their own decision. But you're absolutely right that you do not want to give your kid advice about going to law school or whatever. Because I always say to the kids, are your parents going to law school with you?
Yeah.
Well, no, then
that's right.
If they're not going to take the bar with you, then quite frankly, right? And that's the other part that parents have to recognize too, is as much as you might think my kid would be a great lawyer, it's not your choice. It's not your choice.
Well, and I want to, I guess, seeing as how you're the expert here, I want to ask there, because there's one exception to the rule that I have found really helpful, at least with my adult son, is the one place that I find sharing my experiences has been helpful is when I am sharing the things that I screwed up that didn't kill me or didn't whatever, because I one thing I find is that, and I remember this, like it still happens to me to this day, but you get into your 20s and you start to realize like, oh, I thought grownups actually knew what they were doing.
Yes.
And they're not. Like everybody's pretending like they know what they're doing. And especially your parents, you think your parents have it figured out. And so it feels really crushing when feels like you're screwing things up or things aren't going well. And so I've like, anytime he's really beating himself up over something, I'm like, listen, like, I know what it looks like now, but let me tell you a couple stories about when I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
Like it was a hot mess and I screwed up all these things and whatever. And I think there's some level of him going, oh, like, and it can turn out fine.
Yes.
And it
absolutely.
can turn out fine. So I don't know. I'm assuming that's okay, but that's the one place where like actually sharing your experience is helpful.
Yes. Yes. No, I think that's perfect. And that's what, right? Bosses need to do this. Parents need to do this, that show kids the humanity and who you are versus, well, let me tell you. Yeah. Right. And that's such a different thing. Well, you're being the expert versus being someone who's going to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And share something personal.
Validating that we're all just running around making mistakes. God, yeah. That's what we do. So I want to pull it into work because I think a lot of what you've shared is already particularly like very transferable. I mean, I find that some of my best management learnings have actually been born out of being a parent and learning how to communicate in the highest stakes of circumstances, or at least what it feels like. And so I am curious, when you come into workplaces? I mean, you've talked a little bit, I think, about generally what you want them to understand, but I was wondering if you could start with maybe what are the biggest mistakes that you see being made today by leaders or managers inside of organizations when it comes to their Gen Z employees? Like, what are the most common things that we're getting wrong?
The biggest one, which is the making assumptions, thinking that I know what young people want, or I understand somebody because I was once 22 or 23 myself. So I should therefore understand what it's like to be a 22-year-old in the world that we live in today. That's the biggest one. And then it's that and our biases, right? And it's the biases that we are not aware of just seeing someone or hearing someone tell a story, or it's really our own stuff. It always comes down to our own stuff. Like, how are we perceiving young people? So it's the perception of and how emotionally intelligent are the leaders, that they're aware of, I have these biases, or I might have a certain feeling about a young person. So there's that part of it. And then the other part, it's just the tactical day-to-day of not training them. I mean, this is one of the biggest things that I hear constantly, which is, and I watched it with my clients. I was with young people through the entire pandemic. I watched people graduate college in their car and then start a job in their childhood bedroom, and what it was like for them, because they would hit that Zoom button and the meeting would end and they were alone. So we have a lot of young people that are in the workplace right now that really never got the training that they needed. Mm-hmm. And then the other part of it too is this assumption of, well, this is how the workplace works. And it's like, well, how are they to know this? And then people are upset that, oh, these young people, they don't have the same social skills or this or that. And it's like, well, okay, maybe I will give you that. The world, I think texting has made our lives way too easy to like cancel plans. And right back remember when you had to call someone up and actually get them on the phone and cancel plans, right? It's a little different. So I do think that some of the conveniences of our world, the how isolated people are, it is affecting young people. They don't have the same level of, I believe, social skills that I think other generations had. But okay, so then what? It's almost like this anger. Well, they don't understand. It's like, well, okay, so this is what they need to learn. They may not need to learn some other things over here. They may not need to understand how to, get set up in technology or do any of these other things, but you need to explain to them that this is how this workplace works. And, there was this idea for such a long time where you just kind of go into work and you keep your mouth shut and you put your head down and you go and you don't question anything. That's how I was taught. But again, I could pay my bills. I saw a future for myself. I don't know how I would feel if I had just gone through a major pandemic and someone wanted me to work extra hours with no money. I mean, right? Maybe it's a little different for you. So,
yeah.
But
I've always thought, sorry. Yeah, I love that. Well, I just was going to say, like, I've always thought that's interesting how, like, we're very quick to judge, and millennials started this. At least I remember it. And then Gen Z in particular has like zero tolerance for some of the just ridiculous things that are in plain sight that none of us like. Mm-hmm. They just are like, yeah, no thanks. I don't want to work extra hours for free. Like you said, you're paying me for 40. Or I don't want to go to that after hours happy hour because you're not paying me for that. Like I'm just going to go home and do what I want to do, right? Or I'm not going to punch in for that. So I think it's interesting, the judgment. It's like, well, if we're going to do it, then we expect everybody to just like, it's so interesting, the dynamics that are there. So what advice do you give? Are there, as you think about, I'm just trying to think of some nuggets that if you're in this situation or if you're in an organization where you've got a lot of Gen Z employees or you're a manager and you have Gen Z folks that you work with on your team, what are the top 2 or 3 things that you coach those leaders on, or the advice that you give them for how to better engage with their youngest employees?
Yeah. So it's always about starting with ourselves. And that's that emotional intelligence piece of it. You have to be aware of your own stuff. What do you think? What do you believe is happening? And getting curious with yourself. And again, this isn't about judgment or blame or beating yourself up. We all have our biases. We all have our stuff. It's more of understanding, okay, and just owning it. Like I am resentful towards. So I'll give you one with my millennial clients. I remember they would tell me like, "Oh my God, I went to Paris for the week with my boyfriend." And they could do that because you could work anywhere. And so I remember feeling this like I was chained to my desk. I couldn't go anywhere or do anything. And it's that, right? You can feel that resentment kind of building of like, well, how is that? How is that fair? And it's like, no, you have to let that go of fairness. You have to let that go of that it's all about evolving and growing as people. So, you got to let those things go and recognize that. And then if you can't let it go, why can't you? Like that's the personal work. And then the other part of it is just getting curious. I'm constantly amazed by how often I will ask, well, have you asked them? Did you ask them why they didn't do this? Did you ask them what happened? No. Because we then assume we know why they did what they did. Because I think that the kid that, right, who doesn't want to go to the happy hour, you don't know, we're making this assumption he doesn't care about his work, he's lazy, he doesn't do this or that. It's like, maybe this is when he goes to yoga or he goes see his therapist, or maybe this is his mental health hour before he has to go home and deal with a bunch of other stuff. And that's the 1 hour he has a day for himself. So we don't ask enough questions. We assume we know what other people are going through. We assume we know things. And you have to get curious. You have to stop thinking that you know everything.
Well, I also, like, I think about the happy hour thing. And one of the things that I think about, I'm curious how this has shown up with your clients. There's also a really interesting dynamic that I think is happening or playing out around when there was no option, you got thrown into the workplace. You got thrown into I remember I worked at small businesses until I was in my late 20s. And I finally then came into a larger corporate situation. Mm-hmm. And I didn't understand any of the dynamics. Like I didn't understand. I came in as a manager in a bigger organization. I knew nothing about like understanding the politics, understanding the dynamics, the meetings after the meetings before the meetings, mm-hmm. the allies that you need to build, like all of this game that's afoot. Mm-hmm. And I was really ambitious. I wanted to get ahead, and I stepped in some really bad stuff early on because I didn't know what I was doing. I just was knocking things over and trying to get work done. And then I had people start to like teach me, and I started to mm-hmm. observe what was working and whatever. And I wonder about that piece of it, right? Part of those happy hours is, that person that is coordinating the happy hour, that's your mm-hmm. boss, is a really well-connected person, and their boss trusts their judgment on people. Mm-hmm. So this is an opportunity for you to spend some time one-on-one with them to build that relationship. Mm-hmm. Who's coaching? Like, I just wonder we're not taking the time to also, and I don't think this is brand new, but I think it's got to be extra hard in the world of hybrid and remote work, that they're missing out on all of that kind of passive learning or mm-hmm. that sort of like hallway learning or mm-hmm. the coffee room learning. I'm curious how much that's showing up and how much are Gen Z employees aware of that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, because that's the part that's really hard is that I get why people don't want to commute into an office every day. And at the same time, yes, I'm with you. I think that young people don't even realize what they're missing out on. And but the struggle right now is, and I don't blame other older generations, we just don't have enough time. Yeah. I mean, we are putting so much pressure on people. We are asking people, I mean, it's been like this year after year after year to do more with less and less time. And so what we're seeing is there are a lot of managers out there that want to be that kind of manager, that wants to sit down and talk to them about, hey, this is why I think maybe this might be a good idea, or hey, can you try to come 1 week and just see how it goes, and then we'll try to figure something else out. That's the thing is that I think a lot of managers would like to have these conversations. They just don't know when, how, And it takes a whole other host of skills to be able to, right? What we're talking about is the becoming a better manager, becoming a better leader. It takes time and energy and awareness and that people don't necessarily have. And so I think this is one piece of why we're getting so stuck, is everyone's kind of looking to everyone else, because the older generations, they're like, I'm tired. I've been working all this time. I'm exhausted. You need to be doing this. You need to go to this. You need to go to the happy hour. You need to do this. And it's like, they're not wrong in their exhaustion and their feelings about it of wait a second, I was promised that this would end someday and that you would take over and do this stuff. And then we've got the younger people who are sitting there going, and I don't blame them either for thinking, okay, but I'm not getting paid and this is important to me. And okay, well, I'll just leave this company, you know? And then again, people see that as, oh, they're not loyal. It's like, no, because quite frankly, you're not very loyal to them and you don't care about their mental health. So, and they do.
Right.
So, and I think this is the part that is so tricky. And I feel for everybody involved and the people that call me and hire me and all of this, because a lot of times it's really about something that needs to happen at the tippy top. Yeah. You know, it really is some dynamic that needs to happen at the tippy top. But this is what I say to my young clients. I'm like, but don't stop. Keep fighting. As much as these other generations want to get mad at you, because I've learned more from Gen Z about taking time for myself and setting limits and boundaries than anyone else. And it took me a long time to wake up and realize, oh, wait a second. I can say no. I don't need to be responsible for, I don't need to do these things. I too can say no. So it's really going to take it's Gen Z is really pushing people to get uncomfortable. And it's a little bit like, well, what happens instead of looking at them and blaming them and being angry at them about the situation? What happens if you then decide, okay, I'm going to do this differently too? Yeah. If everybody got together and did it differently, it would change, but that's hard.
It kind of brings us to the thing we're not talking about, which we are talking about now, which is the reason so much of this is so complicated is that the model of work that we're trying to make work is very broken.
Yes.
And it's been very broken, and we're all trying to make it work. Gen Z just is the latest to come in and go, what in the world are you doing?
Yes.
You know, because they can see the consequence of it. They see the burnout and the exhaustion and all the nonsense. And it's like, why? Yeah. And for them, the economic model broke. And so they don't even get the benefit on the back end. So I'm hopeful that maybe they'll lead the revolution, right? That we'll finally, maybe they'll be the ones that can drive us forward. And so this actually brings me to my last question, this question that I ask everyone when they join me on the podcast. And that is this. It's sort of, I want to, I guess, see what your hope is for the future. And so when you think about work broadly in 5 years from today, what's one thing you hope will be different about it than it is today?
My biggest hope is that each of these, that everyone starts prioritizing themselves and starts setting better boundaries so that they have the time and bandwidth to do all of the, to do a lot of this emotional work, a lot of this stuff so that they can be better managers, they can be better workers. This is the only way things are going to change. Is it really, it's, I think we keep looking to young people, but it's like, no, we all need to change this. So for me, my hope is that we shift our mindset around what we believe work should be or shouldn't be, what our requirements, what we're expecting of ourselves, because things have gotten very broken and skewed because of technology. And because, technology has created this ability to work anywhere and any time, but now we can work anywhere at any time. And so my hope is that in 5 years, we kind of get closer and closer to kind of fixing that, of really understanding that and finding a balance, I
like it. I will keep my fingers crossed for that one for sure. So hopefully we can help make it happen in some little way.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Tess, we're coming to the end. And so I like to, as we kind of wrap up and transition out, I like to end with a one-word checkout. And so in one word, how are you feeling as we wrap up our conversation?
Excited. Like hopeful. I was going to say hopeful, but I think it's more excited just of what's to come.
And I think my word's curious. I really like the call to curiosity, and I think that's something that I always like to be reminded of. So in any relationship, more curiosity generally is a pathway to a better relationship. So I love that.
Oh, yes.
So thank you.
It is actually the easiest thing. It seems so hard to do, but if you just respond to everything with curiosity, you will be amazed how you will get into a lot less fights. There'll be a lot less tension in your life.
What a great way to send us off. Tess, thank you. This was fun. I really appreciate you having this conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Yes.
So if people want to connect with you or learn more about your work, where is the best place for them to go?
Probably my website, which is just tessbrigham.com, though it's going through, we're in the midst of shifting and changing some things. But you can find me online, just my name, Tess Brigham, in any of the social medias or LinkedIn. You can go check out my TED Talk, go watch it, please share it with a friend. And then there's my podcast, Gen Mess with Tess. If you're interested in hearing more about the generations at work and just mental health in general, about, how do we do all of this? And go check it out.
You do put a lot of great stuff out in the world. We're going to include all of those links in the show notes so people can easily find their way to you and all of your great stuff. And so thank you. Thank you for all the work you're doing. And thank you for the little nudge towards better relationships with our kids and our younger employees. So appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for listening. I hope you can sort of take some insights from this conversation and go back and maybe hopefully support your kids in a better way. If you're a parent of a Gen Zer, maybe engage or create better conversations with your younger employees at work. Take it back, make a difference, be more curious. That is our takeaway. Be more curious all the time. And please remember to check in with those who matter most to you. Might be the most important thing you can do today. Till next time.